You know what I always found interesting about the rise and fall of European empires? A correlation from religiosity to racism. When the European empires began, such as the early Spanish and Portuguese empires and the English empires, they did not begin as genocidal racistic morons. So the early Spanish and Portuguese empire, they did not commit mass genocide on a exterminational and replacement level. They've committed mass massacres, of course, but they did not exterminate the natives. They conquered them in the hopes of forced conversions, and that's when their empires have risen. Their empires began to fail in the 17 to 1800s when they began the caste system between races and mixed races, and imposed race-based slavery against black people. So when they began converting natives and other peoples to Christianity, they began as an empire. But when they stumbled into racism, they collapsed. I could say the same with other empires. The British Empire began in the 1600s trying to convert natives and other peoples to Christianity. Then the British Empire started to fall in World War One and World War Two due to caste systems of racism and race-based genocides. The difference between the Protestants and the Catholics is this: the Protestant countries were more racist and were less intense on missionaries, but when they did be missionary to various peoples, it was by the individuals who behaved far better than the colonial government or some of the colonial settlers. The missionaries behaved better. Whereas Catholic missionaries did forced conversions, and that's where we get all the rape and massacre scandals, where we hear of churches with native graveyards of massacred people underneath. You get that from Catholicism, whereas from Protestantism, they converted less people to Christianity, but they still did. But the empires were more racistic, more bigoted. So the European empires began as mighty empires with the cross, and they began because they rejected religion for race, and they rejected faith for secularism. In the 1900s, when World War One and World War Two happened, the European empires collapsed. They just collapsed, and I think that's God saying, "I didn't let you guys rise in the 15 to 1600s to be religious empires, to be genocidal empires. The world must become Christianized, not genocided." So the Europeans invalidated their own denominations by becoming less religious and more racist, whereas other denominations in Christianity maintain imperial control without bigotry or secularism, aka the Ethiopian Empire. The Ethiopian country today should be originally the size of the small state of Amhara and Eritrea, that area, northwest Ethiopia, Eritrea. They began as a religious empire, they controlled the entire territories. So the size that they are today is due to imperial control, and they didn't have much forced conversions, with a few exceptions. They spread more peacefully, religiously. They just were violent politically in their conquests, which can happen because people's Christianity can spread peacefully. Doesn't mean the empire does. The empire spreads forcefully and conquers land and butchers an entire population. We got the mean genocidal soldiers and governors, while we have the nice guys in robes saying become Christian. That's basically Protestantism. We have the devil's hand holding the angel's wings, is my analogy. The devil's hand being the empire, doing all the evil stuff we associate, while the angel's hand, or the angel's wings rather, are the missionaries who have better morality. Whereas in Catholicism, everything was basically the devil's hand. The missionary Catholics were brutal. Have you ever seen how Mexico became Christian? Trust me, it wasn't how the Native Americans in Canada became Christian. In fact, we can see that in Quebec. In Quebec, it was massacres and forced conversions. In the rest of Canada, the white guys were too racist to convert them to Christianity, so most of them stayed animists. Only some converted to Christianity because some Protestants actually cared about souls. And here's the Orthodox Christians, on the contrast. They were racist a little, not a lot, and they had little to no missionary zeal. So the Greek, Bulgarian Empire, not Greek, the Slavic Bulgarian, why did I call them Greek? What the hell? They're not Greek. The Slavic Bulgarian Empire and the Russian Empire, they have moments of genocide, such as the Circassian genocide and the massacre of Turks in Bulgaria. They have no history that I'm aware of forcing Muslim populations or pagan populations to be Christian, that I'm aware of. The only times I think of that they forced Christianity on others is they forced Protestant immigrants in Germany from Germany, because in Russia they had a lot of German Protestant immigrants, and I think they forced them to become more Orthodox. And they forced Jews to become Orthodox. So the Russian Empire today, I mean, you can look at Russia; it's a very religious society, whereas in Soviet times it was atheistic. But look at Russia; it's still a very large country, and it's still very religious. Um, Currently at war with Ukraine, which are also an Orthodox country. There's this misconception that Ukraine banned the Orthodox Church. In reality, they banned the Russian Orthodox Church. They didn't ban Christianity. I don't know why people say that. People are not being persecuted for being Christian. The only Christianity persecuted in Ukraine is churches that associate with the Russian government. Anyway, the point was Christianity in the 15 and 1600s created European empires, and racism and secularism in the 18 to 1900s uh, destroyed European empires. And it actually kind of reminds me of the Abbasid Umayyad situation. The Rashidun Umayyad Empire was Arab supremacy, and their empire fell, replaced by the multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, denominationally religious, rather, Abbasid Empire. The Abbasids were like, hey, let's spread Islam peacefully, and let's stop being racist towards all the races. And so the Abbasid Empire was Persians and Arabs and Turks, mostly Persians and Arabs, working together. Um, while the Umayyads and Rashiduns were like, be Arab or die, be Muslim or be taxed and persecuted. Whereas in the Abbasid Empire, Jews and Christians were not persecuted. So it's kind of the Islamic equivalent to what I'm thinking of. I'm not a Muslim, but I mean, when I think of an analogy, that's what comes to mind. Empires rise in God's grace when they try to bring people to Christ. Empires fall when they become too racially arrogant. Um, like this empire right here in the 1600s, uh, they were barely racist. They went to the New World and began converting people to Christianity or settling. Um, there were some war crimes and tragedies that occurred, but it was better off. And then in the 1700s, we got a bunch of white guys who got black slaves, and the British Empire banned slavery in the 1800s, but you still see it. Trace elements of racism, like the Irish potato famine. I mean, they did that because they were not Anglican or Methodist, but because they were Catholic. So that's what I'm generally saying. Um, Other people might have different associations, but I mean, you literally have reasons. Europe fell. I mean, we literally have white supremacists saying they won't worship Jesus because he's brown. I mean, if they're gonna abandon God because of his skin color, then the white supremacist empire who mocks God will lose their empire. Like God is not someone to be mocked. But I'm not joking. I have actually have seen people say that. It used to be that people want to try and be idiot white supremacists and say Jesus was a white man, and nowadays they want to worship Scandinavian gods and to reject Jesus. Um, Even though the Scandinavian gods are pathetic spirits that do nothing, um, and skin color doesn't mean shit. I mean, we had the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Chaldeans, Babylonian Empire. We got two Babylonian empires that I'm aware of, two or three Assyrian empires, and the Akkadian Empire. Like most writing, metallurgy, agriculture, urbanization, that came from the Mesopotamia region, which were, guess what? Sometimes olive and tan skin at your lightest spectrums, but very often brown skin. Or if you're near southeastern Iraq in the Kuwait region, dark brown. So it's not even a European empire. So I mean, people say white supremacy, but in their idiocy, they forget that the Mesopotamians had the greatest empires. In fact, they hijacked one of the medieval empires. The Abbasid Empire was originally a Arab empire centered in Arabia and moved to Syria, but then the Abbasids were like, let's move it to Mesopotamia. So the Abbasid Empire, which ruled Egypt, Arabia, the Levant, I think the Caucasus, but correct me if I'm wrong, and Iran, and they thrived. Like Iraq either built an empire or made another empire flourished. Like if you were from Iraq, you built an empire. If you weren't an empire builder, then you made some other empire enriched by exporting your culture, values, and your traditions. And there was a time when Iraq was Christian, but under another empire. So if you've heard of the Parthian Sassanid Empire, um, which was a Persian empire with two different dynasties, it was the same Persian empire. It's just one was led by Parthians, and one led by the actual ethnic Persians. And during that time, Iraq was actually Christian. They followed the Assyrian Church of the East. And had Islam not failed, the Assyrian Church of the East would have continued doing what they've always done, make missionary trips across Iran and across what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Central Asia. We got Nestorian, Assyrian Church of the East denominations exporting across Iran. Had Iran converted to the Nestorian denomination, then their missionary trips would have just been a national conversion. Um, but obviously that did not happen. Anyway, I don't know why I went off to a tangent. My original purpose of the video was European empires began united by a cross, and they ended collapsing because they began to become atheistic, secular, or white supremacist, which is dumb. Because God is above culture. Culture who values secularism becomes godless and has a lot of crime rate and anarchy and STDs, whereas a nation that becomes religious doesn't have that crap. But a nation that becomes racist also collapses because God wants nations to become Christian, not nations to become exterminated, and therefore God will have nations be a coalition that destroys such a racist empire. Naturally, if the gospel's message is for the world, a genocidal empire that loves race so much would fall.